The Dave Hooker Show. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free. Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
What are you talking about? Loaded up for a show. We are. Welcome to the program. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. It's a Wednesday. So Jimmy Hyams will join us. We'll talk the Alabama effect and how Tennessee must overcome a physical game against Alabama. Whether it's a loss or it's a win, it can certainly have an effect, as Caleb does each and every Wednesday. Also, 5 Vols and 5 Wildcats to watch. Is this a make or break game for Joe Milton? Because Kentucky's pass defense is absolutely horrendous. We will discuss that. You can vote. That's on our poll question on YouTube. Love for you to take advantage of that. And then when you start to look at the quarterbacks around the nation, like, of course, Michael Penix Jr. and Harrison Bailey, Brian Moore, Caden Salter, you know, those guys were pretty much run off by Tennessee. And I wonder, of those, obviously Penix, but would Tennessee have been better off with any of those guys, just Penix, or are they just fine with Joe Milton? So we'll discuss that. So a lot to get to on the program. And we begin with Michigan scouting Tennessee, which is pretty bizarro. Shows you how relevant the Vols were last year and how respected they were. Caleb, this is a story that is getting national exposure. And I'll tell you one thing. This may cost Jim Harbaugh his job ultimately. Hope you're doing well, sir. How are you, Caleb?
I'm good. How are you, Dave?
Never better, my man. Never better. Ready to move on to the Cats.
Yes, that's true. It's kind of crazy. You want to be talking about Kentucky, but then you got to talk about the scandal, which you and I don't think is a serious scandal, but I'm more interested in how Michigan applied this scandal, which I don't think people are paying attention to, because I don't think it was just, and let's get into the soon, I don't think it was about scouting these schools because they might face them in the playoff. I think it was about trying to keep these schools out of the playoff and sharing this information with some of the teams that these schools were playing in November.
Well, now I want to be real clear. I think it's a serious scandal. I think it's a dumb rule. Okay, not being able to scout an opponent, but I think it's a serious scandal, and I think somebody has leaked this because they're trying to get Jim Harbaugh out of there. I think you're seeing the steps to get Jim Harbaugh out of there, who's flirted with the NFL despite how successful he's been at Michigan. Listen, you can become spoiled, and I don't think there's any question about that. So do I think it's a dumb rule? I think you should be able to buy tickets and go scout another team. I got no problem with that. It's a dumb rule, but no, I think this is a very serious scandal. And the fact that it ties in with Tennessee is pretty bizarre. So that gets us started with what the H? How did Tennessee become involved with this? Maybe they'll get another coach fired besides their own. Here we go.
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
Okay, so you ran across this first, and it was Michigan scouting the Vols, and you came up with a conspiracy theory that, I'll be honest with you, Caleb, you come up with some conspiracy theories sometimes that throw me for a loop a little bit. I love it, don't get me wrong. But this one I'm kind of on board with, even though it's kind of out there. So let's start with what happened. What the H? Why was Michigan scouting Tennessee? And it's brought to you by Andy Mason of AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Andy Mason, best prices, best service in the biz in Knoxville, over 40 years of experience. So, Caleb, why was Michigan scouting the Vols, and how did the Vols get drug into Jim Harbaugh's ongoing khaki drama?
So it wasn't just the Vols. Allegedly, Michigan scouted Tennessee, Clemson, Georgia, Oregon, and Alabama last year at different points, went to different games with all of them. Now, with Tennessee, we know the game they scouted, and the university's now released some information on it where there was a suspicious purchase of a ticket from one of those ticket buying services online, and somebody's name that was given to somebody else that makes it very clear Michigan went to the Tennessee-Kentucky game on October the 29th. For those who don't remember, that was right before Tennessee was set to play Georgia the next week. It was right before the college football playoff rankings were set to come out. So Michigan scouted Tennessee. Notice the names I said there, Dave. Tennessee, Clemson, Georgia, Oregon, Alabama. What do 4 of those 5 schools have in common outside of what do every school outside of Georgia have in common from those 4?
You tell me.
They all suffered mysterious upset losses in November.
Okay.
Playoff hopes.
Okay.
Now, one of them, we all were, I'll get to Tennessee and Clemson in a minute because I think you guys know where I'm going with that. Oregon was upset by Washington and Oregon State in November. Now, you could maybe assume they'd lose one of those games, but you wouldn't expect them to lose to Washington at home. That kind of threw people off a little bit. And Oregon State, yes, it was at Oregon State, but Oregon was a better team. They were in the playoff hunt. Alabama lost to LSU. One of the reasons one of the reasons so many people picked out LSU to win the West this year was because they beat Alabama Brian Kelly's first year. But Dave, outside of that Alabama win last year, if you really look at it, LSU didn't do anything that impressive. We based everything on LSU beating Alabama last year, but they got blown out by Tennessee at home. They lost to Texas A&M at the end of November, and they got blown out by Georgia in the SEC title game. They weren't that good of a team. It's just the Alabama game that led all of us to hype them up this year. So that's mysterious. But the most mysterious is obviously South Carolina, who is 2-5 this year, was 6-4, and Shane Beamer may have been on the brink of being fired. And out of the blue, they have a resurgence where they just beat the brakes off Tennessee, and then they go and beat Clemson, costing both of them shots at the college football playoff. So my theory comes, it wasn't just about scouting teams they may play. It was about sharing information on those teams because they wanted to clear the field to get to the playoff in case they lost to Ohio State. Now, they didn't lose to Ohio State anyway, but this was a way to clear the field to make sure that it didn't matter if they lost to Ohio State, they were getting in anyway.
Okay, so your theory is that this information was shared among coaches?
I believe this information was shared with other coaches. Yes, I believe that Michigan shared this information with South Carolina and either Oregon State or Washington, and definitely LSU, because these upsets were all very suspicious.
Okay, tell me on the message board, do you think that this is crazy conspiracy Caleb time or not? I don't think it's crazy. I'm not adhering to it, but I don't think it's crazy. And I think it's a possibility because all these coaches talk. Okay, so we go to SEC Media Days to bring you interviews, but we also go to SEC Media Days to talk to other media members so that we can get them on our show. David said he's drinking the Kool-Aid, and the coaches convention is the exact same thing. They have it every December. Those guys don't go there to sit in some sort of meeting about a 4-3 defense and how to run the fundamentals. It's networking. That's exactly what it is. And they go to the coaching convention, which is usually held in Dallas every December. In other words, you may not think it, but all these coaches know each other. And they go from job to job. I mean, goodness, look at Jeremy Pruitt. He was at so many jobs, he knew everybody. If you want to look at Lane Kiffin and the staff he was able to assemble. Why? Because they all had ties amongst each other, and he plucked guys from everywhere. So they all know each other. So could I see a sharing of information? Absolutely, I could. However, I think that was ultimately the Jeremy Banks game. And Jeremy Banks, because of the off-field issues, missing a practice and starting a skirmish with Hendon Hooker 2 days before the game, is what cost Tennessee that game. So I think you're on to something very interesting, and I would be stunned if some of Michigan's coaches didn't share some information with some of those teams, but with Tennessee in particular, I believe firmly it was the Jeremy Banks game. But all of what you're saying does make an awful lot of sense. And these coaches, because I'll talk to them, they know each other way more than you think. A coach at Alabama doesn't think, I hate that coach at Auburn because he's wearing Auburn. No, you don't think that. You think the postman hates the UPS guy? No. I mean, it's just two different jobs to them, to a lot of them. Yeah, I think that Tennessee fans were raised in a time where Philip Fulmer and Johnny Majors had ties to the university, but that's the exception to the rule, Caleb. That's usually not the case. These guys all know each other, and it wouldn't stun me. What do you think? David says he's drinking the Kool-Aid. Is Caleb onto something? Did the Wolverines cost Tennessee a berth in the college football playoff? That's what Caleb's saying right now.
Dave, I'm with you. It was a Jeremy Banks game, but here's where it's weird. The Jeremy Banks game may explain how South Carolina, which was scoring 7 to 10 points a game, had like 6 points the week before against Florida, could maybe explain why they scored 40 points. It doesn't explain how they scored a touchdown on every single drive that was meaningful in that game. Every single drive they scored a touchdown. That doesn't happen, okay? I don't care if you're playing a Division III school. You usually don't score a touchdown. I don't care if Alabama's playing a Division III school. You usually don't score a touchdown on every drive. You usually slip up once. They didn't slip up once in that game. And on top of that, it wasn't just Tennessee. They then beat Clemson the next week at Clemson. Okay, that's the year they end the losing streak to Clemson. And then on top of that, again, I want to go back to LSU. I'm starting to think in my mind, because y'all know I was high on Brian Kelly and LSU. Did I overrate them? Because I look back and we based everything about our hype behind LSU this year on that Alabama game. What else did they do last year, Dave? Who else did they beat? Nobody of substance. Nobody. How'd they manage to beat Alabama and beat nobody else of substance? An Alabama team that had its best quarterback in history in Bryce Young. I mean, that's just weird. And so now, at the end of the day, where this all comes down to, I have to point this out. I don't have a problem with sign stealing. Here's my philosophy on it. I think sign stealing works to the advantage of the team that had their signs stolen, because if you actually are smart, you realize your signs are stolen, and then you switch your signs up at halftime, and you catch the whole defense off guard every time. You line up the same formation, pretend you're running the same signs, and then you have the advantage at that point. And so
it's not hard to change your signs at all. And Tennessee's is pretty difficult because they have 3 guys sending in signs and they wear the different color shirts. So it's not difficult to change that up. We're not talking about rewriting the English language. It's really not difficult at all. A couple of other notes on this. You'd think Michigan would have won a national championship before they fired a head coach. Would they go after? I will tell you this. There's a pretentiousness, an academic pretentiousness that we've talked about in the Big Ten, in some Big Ten schools. Ohio State less than others, but there certainly is at Michigan. Michigan, I could see being irked by Jim Harbaugh flirting with the NFL, and now this comes up, and they could run him off and think that they could go hire another coach because they're cocky and they don't like the fact that he's not a play-by-the-rules type of guy and he's not a yes or no sir guy. He's a jackass to deal with by all coaches I've talked to. So, yes, I think that they would win a national championship, but I think they would risk it and try to get somebody else thinking, hey, we're Michigan. We can do this. Tennessee did that with Philip Fulmer, by the way, so it's not unheard of. Now, David Michael brings up an interesting point. Would Kiffin go to Michigan? Well, the answer is hell yes, but they wouldn't hire him. But he would go.
First of all,
he would go in a heartbeat.
He would go in 2 seconds. But if they have to fire Jim Harbaugh because of a scandal, if you have to fire a coach for a scandal, the number one coach you're not calling is Lane Kiffin at that point. That's just
whoa! You're talking to the guy who wrote the story that there's no way Southern California would come after Lane Kiffin the day that Lane Kiffin left. So
because that was a desperation hire. Do you remember how many people turned down USC because they knew that USC was in trouble?
Yeah, I wrote about him and looked like a jackass because the story that came out in the paper at 6 a.m. and by 7 p.m. he was USC's head coach.
So, Dave, do you think Michigan is stuck in – so we know Notre Dame is. Notre Dame is stuck in – they believe it's still 1970, right? That they can win with toughness and fundamentals and grittiness and discipline and going to class and it doesn't matter. They still believe that old school mentality and they're like, we're Notre Dame, so it doesn't matter. Do you think Michigan has that mentality here? Or do you think they have a frustrating, like, guys, Michigan has won half of a national championship since 1947. Let me say that again. They've won half of a national championship since 1947. Are you telling me Michigan has the Notre Dame pretentiousness, or don't you think at this point they have a desperation of, we're tired of not winning national titles. Forget it. We're just going to go win the national title and stick the middle finger up to the NCAA that has no teeth anyway.
I think they have the Notre Dame pretentiousness. I really do. The man of steel, let's call him Clark, says, I am suspicious of this theory. Very interesting. David Michael taking a step further and saying Michigan paid Banks to sweep Hendon's leg. It's all there. I'm not ready to go that far, but
I don't think anybody knew about Jeremy Banks and Hendon Hooker.
No, I don't think so. All right, here we go. It is time for 5 Vols to watch for and 5 Kentucky Wildcats to watch for, and it's brought to you by Zen Sports. I'll tell you about them here momentarily. Let's go through the Cats, and then I'm going to tell you why this is a make-or-break game for Joe Milton. But let's take a look at the Cats as we move on to Kentucky. Chaz Nimrod, you've got at number 5. Nimrod, why is he one of the Vols to watch?
So each of the last 2 losses Kentucky's had, the tallest wideout for each team was the leading receiver, with the exception, the leading wide receiver. Brock Bowers was the leading receiver for Georgia. But so Kentucky's having an issue dealing with taller wide receivers. Brew McCoy, it's a shame that he's hurt because this would be his game to shine. I think Tennessee gave Chaz Nimrod a look 2 weeks ago. I think they gave Caleb Webb a look last week because they wanted to see who was better. I think it's very clear Chaz Nimrod is better. So I think they're going to go with Chaz Nimrod this week.
I agree. Nimrod passes the eye test more than Webb to me. Cooper Mays, you make a great point that Tennessee's interior got pretty beat up last week by Alabama. I expect him to step up and have a really big game based off the Vol report brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning that we posted on Sunday. I think he's PO'd, to be real honest with you. And then Omari Thomas, you almost could put him in here every week because he kind of is the anchor of that defensive front, right?
You could. And I love Omari Thomas. I mean, I've loved him since I interviewed him at SEC Media Days, and I know we can get biased at that, but he's just the nicest guy, but he can play really mean on the field, and he's a really smart player for a defensive tackle too. And he kind of went away a little bit in the second half last week, and I think they just got a little tired being on the field too long. Kentucky is 3rd in the nation in yards per carry. Tennessee is going to have to stop that first and foremost up front with Omari Thomas.
Yep. Aaron Beasley. Why Beasley?
Well, again, Kentucky 3rd in the nation in yards per carry. You got to get the push up front, but then you got to close the gaps. Dave, you talk about gap integrity all the time. That's crucial here. Aaron Beasley has to find the right gap to gash through because he's got to get into the backfield in this game. And that is what he is best at. It was Elijah Herring last week because you had to contain Jalen Milroe. You don't really have to contain Devin Leary. You just have to bum rush the running game. And Aaron Beasley does that better than anybody in the SEC.
Do I talk about it, gap integrity all the time? Because that makes me feel like a total nerd.
You've talked about you're the one who taught me that phrase, and I'm big on it now because I'm like, I didn't realize, but that is the most no one ever pays attention to the front 7 playing with gap integrity and understanding the right gaps to fill. That is, I never thought about that until you brought it up, honestly. And
yeah, it's a great way to give up a back cut to a running back if you don't have gap integrity. It doesn't mean you're making the play every time, but you've got to do your job. And that's nice of you to say. John Adams hates terms like gap integrity. He always makes fun of me for those. Even
though he himself had no integrity, or the program itself had no integrity, Penn State was the king of gap integrity when they were linebacker U under Joe Paterno.
That's pretty good. All right. Today's tough question deals with the number 1 ball to watch, and it's brought to you by Zen Sports.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
We'll also get to 5 Wildcats to watch in this game. Zen Sports, the new sports book in Tennessee, revolutionizing the way you earn sports betting rewards. We're going to talk Joe Milton. That means no more deposit bonuses that turn into deposit nightmares. It's huge for Joe Milton. On Zen Sports, what you see is what you get. And with their cash rewards program, you get a lot of cash. For a welcome bonus, earn an unlimited 5% cash back on your betting volume for your first 15 days when you sign up with promo code HOOKED. That's right, HOOKED. Unlimited 5% cash back. Keep betting, keep earning with up to 3% cash back on your betting volume every month after that. And refer friends to earn a percentage of their betting volume as cash rewards too. Support our sponsors. Use the promo code HOOKED. Zen Sports, bringing the cash back to Tennessee. So if you bet big on sports, you want to be betting on Zen Sports. Zen Sports betting just got better. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Must be 21 and over, and Tennessee to bet. So Joe Milton, number one on your list of balls to watch. Is this a make or break game? And it's our poll question, today's tough question on YouTube. So we'll check the votes on that here momentarily. I'm going to go ahead and tell you yes, because Kentucky has a good rush defense. They're good against the run, and their pass defense is absolutely horrible. You can check out the numbers on offthehooksports.com. Kentucky has allowed just over 3 yards per carry, just like Alabama. As a matter of fact, it's 3.07 to 3.09. Kentucky a little bit better. They've allowed 95 yards rushing per game. Alabama has yielded 109 yards on the ground per contest. Now, as for that pass defense, it is bad. One of the worst teams in the SEC when it comes to stopping the pass. The Cats have allowed 250 yards per game passing this season. That's 12th in the SEC. Joe Milton can't get it done against Kentucky, then Caleb, if it's Nico time. If Tennessee drops this game to Kentucky and Joe Milton doesn't play well, it's time to go in a different direction. And the pressure's all on him because Kentucky's going to sell out to stop the run, just like Alabama did in the second half. Is this a make or break game? Today's tough question for Joe Milton.
Yes, there's absolutely no excuses for this one. Not only that, it's Nico time because you have a very easy game to get Nico ready next week against UConn, which is this is the perfect game to kind of get his feet wet. Joe Milton's got a ball out. And also Joe Milton reset the clock last week using his legs. So, the way he played with his legs, we talk about dictating coverage all the time with receivers. Sometimes quarterbacks have to dictate coverage by how they use their mobility in the pocket. And Joe Milton's legs now will dictate coverage in this game, which should allow for plenty of open shots downfield. Dave, last week, maybe I was crazy, but it seemed like there were more open shots downfield last week than there had been all year for Tennessee, weren't there? Because teams have been selling out to stop the deep ball, and there were a lot more open shots downfield last week.
I agree, and he's not good at hitting them. Apparently, we are in the minority because on our poll on YouTube that you can vote on, 78% say, nope, still plenty of season left. There is plenty of season left. So in an average game, let's say Kentucky was great against the pass and poor against the run. That's not a make or break game. I don't think it's just the fact that it's Kentucky. I think it's more than that. This defense is designed to stop the run. That's a Mark Stoops defense. So I'm not just saying the next game is Joe Milton's most important game. The factors that I laid out are, I think, extremely important in judging how important this game is for Joe Milton. Tennessee goes up there and loses, and Joe Milton throws for 100 yards, then you've got to look in a different direction, or you're staring a 7-5 season in the face.
Absolutely. I mean, there are still 3 potential losses on the table for Tennessee right now: Kentucky, Missouri, and Georgia. I think this is the most winnable of those 3, don't you, Dave? By far.
Yes.
And yeah, so if you lose this one, you're right, 7-5 is very much on the table. If you win this one, your 9-3 is likely, and 10-2 is still a possibility. So yeah, I'm with you. This is make or break for Joe Milton. And if Tennessee loses this game because Joe Milton played poorly, there's no way you can't go to Nico at that point. I don't think there is. And I say that as someone who actually holds Joe Milton, the person, in high regard. But
I do too. But I'm a little bit, but I'll be a little frank with you. I'm sick of it's me, it's my bad. Oh, that's my bad. Oops, let's hold the players' meeting. It's my bad. Well, yeah, it's your bad. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean,
Hey, That's better than Rick Clausen in 2005 when he started playing poorly in the middle of the season during that quarterback fiasco. And then he told Tennessee fans, if you bail on us now, you're not real fans. Remember when he said that?
Yeah, but I mean, it's just, I don't know. The attitude about it is just like he can slough it off at times. And I've talked to people in the community and it frustrates them as well. I mean, listen, if Caleb doesn't show up for 5 straight shows and he says, it's my bad. Well, yeah, it's your bad, but there would be repercussions. Same thing for me or same thing for anybody else we have regularly on this show. Let's run down the cats to watch as that's on offthehooksports.com. Trevin Wallace, linebacker. Give me a line on Trevin.
So he has 5 tackles for a loss, 3.5 sacks, and an interception and a forced fumble. He's kind of the Aaron Beasley of that defense. He's a rising star on there. He's more the outside linebacker. Derek Jackson is the inside linebacker, but Trevin Wallace is kind of the big playmaker right now. So watch out for him.
Deion Walker, defensive lineman.
Dave, you know this. When your defensive lineman leads your team and tackles for a loss, that's usually a rare talent at defensive line, isn't it? When a defensive tackle does that.
Yes.
It's
And again, I think it speaks to how good Kentucky is against the run. Ray Davis, running back. He's one of the better running backs in the nation, definitely the SEC.
Maybe the best in the nation. I mean, we're talking a guy who has 111 carries for 781 yards. And also 195 receiving yards. So he's already almost at 1,000 yards at this moment. And yeah, Ray Davis is a superstar. Tennessee really has to be ready for him.
The only reason I don't hold him in quite as high regard as you is just because I think Kentucky likes to feed one running back, which is not usually the case across the nation. But yes, he's definitely one of the better running backs in the nation. Devin Leary at quarterback.
Devin Leary is a massive upgrade from Will Levis last year. I am so mad that the Titans are starting Will Levis this week, but Ryan Tannehill's hurt and Malik Willis is terrible. That's the worst 3 quarterback combo in the NFL, by the way. But yes, Devin Leary. I wish Devin Leary was starting for my Titans right now over Will Levis. I think he's a very good quarterback. And the big thing is his top receiver, Tavion Robinson, was banged up before the bye for 2 weeks. He's now had the whole week off to get healthy, so he could be a real threat. And with Kamal Hadden banged up for Tennessee, Devin Leary could be dangerous in this one.
Yep. And then lastly, you've got Maxwell Harrison, the cornerback. He is incredibly aggressive. Tennessee should either beat him or he's going to beat Tennessee. If he jumps some routes and he ends up with a pick or two, it could be bad news for the Vols. So that's number 1 on Caleb's list, and it makes perfect sense to me. Enjoy life when you see better. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Look at me. I got no contacts. I got no glasses. I got LASIK, and it's absolutely awesome. Reach out to them, ccteyes.com, ccteyes.com. Tell them Off the Hook Sports sent you. Support our sponsors. That's why we're here. And I'm telling you, they're the best with cataract surgery as well. They're local doctors, local. They don't fly people in like some other people. ccteyes.com. Again, Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Tell them Off the Hook Sports sent you. Jimmy Hyams up next, and we love visiting with Jimmy. The Alabama effect. Tennessee getting beat down in the second half. Can that affect them in the Commonwealth? Jimmy Hyams up next.
At sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Have you seen the latest TriStar Hats Co. product?
TriStar Hats Co.? What's that?
You know, those really cool hats, shirts, tumblers, and even license plates with 3 stars like the official Tennessee flag and stripes like the American flag. Pretty patriotic if you ask me.
Gotcha. Seen those. Those are cool. Where can I get them?
Simple. TriStarHatsCo.com. And if you order now, there's 10% on any order $50 or more. Plus, use the promo code HOOKED.
With the promo code HOOKED, you get 10% off. That's hooked.
And don't forget free shipping with any order over $50. Stock up at TristarHatsCo.com. That's TristarHatsCo.com. There are plenty of wannabes out there, so make sure you go to TristarHatsCo.com for the best quality and customer service.
Will do, and I'll be sure to use the promo code HOOKED. That's hooked when I do to save an additional 10% off. TristarHatsCo.com.
TriStar Hats Co. is a trademark of TriStar Hats Co. LLC. Any use without express written consent is prohibited.
Who's this guy?
Hello, wizard.
The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of Off the Hook Sports,
What?
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
All righty, welcome back. Portions of the program brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler. Rick Terry, looking for affordable game day jewelry. How about the Fire Opals, a Tennessee tradition? RickTerryJewelry.com. Support our sponsors. That's why we're here. Let's bring in Jimmy Hyams, who we love to visit with each and every Wednesday. And I got two questions for Jimmy before. Hey, Jimmy, how are you?
Fine, Dave. How are you doing?
Never better. I got two questions for you before we get to your Alabama effect column, which is off the hook. Yeah. No, these are interesting ones. So it appears Michigan scouted Tennessee. You talk to coaches like I talk to coaches. Is it outside the realm of possibility that they would have shared information with South Carolina about Tennessee's signals, and that would in part lead to Tennessee's poor performance, even though I think it's mostly Jeremy Banks?
Is it possible? I guess so. Why would Michigan help South Carolina?
I just think coaches.
Oh, that I can give you that one.
Go, Caleb.
Yeah, that not just South Carolina, but LSU, who beat Alabama in November. They scouted Alabama, and then Washington and Oregon State, who beat Oregon, who they also scouted, and also Clemson, who they scouted, and South Carolina beat Clemson. The reason I could say they would want to help these schools is Michigan wanted to make sure they were knocked out of the college football playoff race, so they had an inside track, win or lose, against Ohio State at the end of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
just saying.
Conspiracy Caleb's at it. Jim, one other thing that I did want to ask you is this a make or break game for Joe Milton? It's our today's tough question. The reason I say so is because Kentucky's pass defense is horrible. Their run defense is good. I think they'll load the box. If he goes up to Lexington and lays an egg, do you have any reason to think that he could do better than an 8-4 record? Or you even wrote the Alabama effect could lead to 7-5 if Tennessee loses to Kentucky.
I think from the perspective of where this season's going, yes, it's make or break for Joe Milton. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the coaching staff's going to bench him, but I think as far as where this season's going, they're not going to be any better than 8-4 if they don't beat Kentucky. And they could very well be headed to 7-5 because I think Missouri's pretty good. So I do think it's a make or break for Milton in terms of where this team will go this season.
Wow, well said. Let's get to the Alabama effect. It's a real thing. And I talked to Cooper Mays on our podcast on Sunday, and it's brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. I don't want to read too much into it, but he seemed a little sore and fatigued than other times that I talk to him each and every week. I mean, Alabama beats on you.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real thing, the physical effect and the toll that an Alabama game takes on you.
I did too. And a lot of teams, I don't know everybody's record after the week after, or even 2 weeks after they play Alabama, their next game. I don't know that. I know Tennessee is under Saban. Saban has 15 wins against Tennessee, not counting the most recent because they haven't had a game yet. And Tennessee's 6-9 after those games. Now, most of those wins were over South Carolina when South Carolina wasn't very good. But that's I think it's had effect. I think it has a physical effect. I think it can have an emotional effect on you as well after being in a game like that. Maybe you've had maybe on a rare occasion you had a big win against them, or maybe you had a devastating loss against them. So, yeah, I think there is an Alabama effect. And also, from that emotional standpoint, you're getting up to play Alabama. Regardless of who you are, you're typically getting up emotionally. You can't get up emotionally for 12 games in a row. You can't do it. And the fact you play after the Alabama game, which most everybody gets up for emotionally, I think it's tough the next week to match that emotion.
I completely agree. Caleb?
Jimmy, do you think there's a difference, though, and this may be negative for Tennessee this week, but during this however long they've been playing Alabama and under Nick Saban, 16 years or whatever, do you think it's actually worse this time around? Because most of those games, let's just be honest, throughout the last 16 years, Tennessee went into Alabama, and I don't care what people think about the rivalry, they wrote that game off as a loss. You went in and you're like, this is a loss. We don't care. And even the players, like, we don't really care because we know we're going to lose. Like, South Carolina was more of a circled game than Alabama for most of these seasons. So do you think it's actually a little worse this time because they were emotionally invested in trying to beat Alabama, thinking they had a shot, and then losing in the second half the way they did? Do you think that actually makes it worse than some of the previous losses?
Yes, because you didn't have a great chance to win the game. You were up 13-0. You were up 20-7. You should have been up more if you could have scored in the red zone touchdowns instead of field goals. And then you got a few bad calls, which I think changed the momentum of the game, but still Tennessee should have had the wherewithal to withstand that. So, yeah, I do think it makes it tougher because you were right on the cusp of having a really good chance to beat Alabama, and the rug was pulled out from under you. I think back to Miami a few weeks ago when Mario Cristobal made that stupid play at the end of the game where instead of taking a knee, they run it, they fumble, the other team scores. I picked North Carolina to beat the heck out of them the next week, and they did because Miami was still reeling from the coach's dumb decision. So, Caleb, to your point, I do think when you have an opportunity to win a game like that against Alabama and you don't, I think it makes it harder to recover.
You talked about dumb decisions in your column that Josh Heupel made. The fourth down calls to me, and I know Caleb disagrees, but the fourth down calls to me just seemed like he was trying to force momentum or pull back momentum. It was just forced is the best word that I can come up with, Jimmy.
Well, there are a couple of things there, and I think one of them, somebody told me this. They said Heupel was ticked off at the officials for not giving them the first down for reversing it, and he was going to say, all right, I'm going to stick it to the rest.
Oh, no.
Maybe that was one of them. I don't agree with going for it when you've got the lead on your own territory. And a part of that is this. You think, well, what about the play call? Think about this with Tennessee. So there's an argument, Tennessee leads the SEC in rushing, they average 231 yards a game, whatever. How do they gain most of those yards? When they spread the field and the opponent has 5 or 6 in the box. Tennessee is not a good running team when they bunch it in and the opponent has 8, 9, or 10 men in the box. They are not. And one reason they are not is that their offensive line is not physical enough, and Joe Milton 99% of the time is not going to keep the ball in his own read. So they're not a good running team in short yardage situations when it's compacted, which is another reason I didn't like Tennessee going for it in those situations.
Now, I agree. I do. I think that it felt almost like a basketball team pressing. It felt like the game was slipping away, and maybe Josh Heupel knew that the game was slipping away, and he felt like he made a play happen. But I wasn't a big fan of the fourth down, particularly the one where they lined up in shotgun. But it's one decision to go for it. It's another for that to be your play call. Those are two different conversations, right?
Well, I didn't like the play calls because I don't think they could run the football effectively against Alabama in a bunch situation. The other thing is, why would you do that with the lead? You know, if you're down 7 points, 10 points, whatever, and you're trying to recapture the momentum, that makes a little bit more sense to me to gamble. But why would you do that with the lead? Here's the other part of that too. I've had several people tell me this, and I don't know the answer. Excuse me. But they think that Heupel is not used to having a good defense, and so he doesn't know how to coach with a good defense. Let your defense take over. You don't have to force the issue. You don't have to go for fourth down, punt it, and make Alabama go 65 or 70 yards. I don't know if that's a factor, but I know that some people have suggested to me that Heupel's not really sure how to call a game when he has a good defense.
Yep, that's a very interesting point. Portions of the program brought to you by Herald Group Security Solutions, leadership experience, specialization, addressing problems through unique mission-specific mitigation techniques. Also, making your children safer at schools. They're working with private schools now. We're talking about former service members who go through a 60-day training to make sure that they make schools safer. They're working with private schools. We want to get them with public schools. So you have to go to your school administrators and say, Herald Group Security Solutions, call them. Let's get this thing done. Let's avoid the tragedies that we've seen across the United States of America. All right. So I wanted to ask you about Josh Heupel's talent evaluation, particularly because I'm looking at McAllen Castles, and I think that he is very good. I think Keenan Pili would have been good.
Mm-hmm.
But if you talk about the transfers that were brought in and some of the players that have been brought in, there seems to be a question about talent evaluation with Josh Heupel. What are your thoughts on talent evaluation and what he's brought in, particularly with this incoming transfer class?
Yeah, and you're talking mainly the transfer portal. Is that where you're aiming at?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then we'll probably widen it to just overall, but particularly with those guys. I mean, I think we all thought, well, a lot of people thought Dante Thornton was just going to be Jalen Hyatt Part 2, and that hadn't happened.
That's the poster child for a mistake. Dante Thornton's not good. In fact, D. Williams is better than Dante Thornton, and they still need to use D. Williams on offense. I'm going to beat that drum until they finally do it. And they also I think that there's a mixed bag. That one really stands out. There was a linebacker that came in from Texas named Mitchell. They thought was going to be really good. He wasn't very good. They brought in a couple of them that probably didn't fit their culture either. Now the first year he was plugging holes. I get that. The second year he was more trying to define people that can make an impact, and the same with the third year. I think overall it's been pretty good because a lot of those guys have contributed. Campbell at tackles contributed. Gabe Lawley in the secondary is a decent player. Not great players, but decent players. Thornton to me stands out as a mistake, and so does Mitchell, the linebacker from Texas. I think otherwise they've done all right. I don't know. I haven't evaluated everybody else to see what their percentage is, but I think his percentage on players who have been either starters or pretty good players, I think it would be over 70%, which I guess is okay.
Yeah, I think back in the days when I spent too much time covering recruiting, it was usually 50-50. Guys would pan out and guys wouldn't. Out of a 25-man class, 12 or 13 would be good, and the other 12 or 13 wouldn't. Caleb, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so before I go, I just have to say I'd be remiss as Jimmy, I don't know if you know, but I disagree with both you guys and John Adams. I am very much, if I had my choice, I would not even spend money or waste time on a punter in college. I would just have my kicker do it because I think punting, and Harvard probability studies back me up on this with analytics. Punting is the most overused play in football, and it is a turnover. I don't care what anybody says. A punt is a turnover. You're giving the ball to the other team. So unless it's like 4th and 16 at your own 20, I think the punt's the most overused play. I think you should almost always go for it on 4th and 1 or 4th and inches. But I do agree that the play calls are terrible. I think on 4th and
let's say, how good's Harvard in football? Okay, let's put an end to that crap.
Actually,
in football, I don't care what Harvard says.
Jimmy, how good is Duke right now at football with an Ivy League head coach? I think the future.
But they bunt.
Did he go to Harvard?
I think
he
was
from Harvard.
Princeton. I think it was Princeton or Cornell. One of those.
That rules out Harvard.
Oh, okay. Jimmy's really big on the Ivy League rivalries here. He's like, "Hey, man, I'm Team Cornell all day." But the point I'm bringing up is that I actually think there's an issue right now in football, and it's funny. It goes right to what I'm about to talk about, which is with Tennessee, which is I think one of the problems is one of their biggest misses is Dante Thornton. The other one is Andre Carrick at left guard, and unlike Thornton, I think Thornton is just lazy and doesn't care. I think Carrick is actually one who's just not that good. And I wonder and I think that's one of their issues is they don't have any help at left guard, which is why they couldn't get the push on 4th and 1. But we've talked about for a while, do you think they're having more success with players at lower levels that shined than they are with players that couldn't play at other big name schools.
I want to echo that and say I think that's going to be the trend in the transfer portal as a whole, Jimmy. I think you're going to bring guys up. Why would you leave a Texas if you're good there and you're getting NIL money? I mean, to go to Tennessee, I don't know.
Maybe you're getting more NIL money.
That's true.
I don't know what his money was at Texas. I don't know the answer to that. The question is a really good one. I haven't researched it, so I'm sitting here trying to think of all the players that have come in. They brought in a guy from Mississippi State, Javante Payton. He didn't catch a lot of passes, but he caught a lot of touchdown passes, percentage versus catches. Velus Jones came in from Southern Cal. He was really good. And then they brought in Costello from Stanford, and he wasn't. Off the top of my head, I think of a mixed bag of success. But then I look at one of the best players, in my opinion, in the SEC. Ray Davis came from Temple, went to Vanderbilt. Now he's at Kentucky, and he's really good. That's a guy, and I consider Temple obviously smaller, right? So this guy, and Vanderbilt. So this guy has upgraded his situation. I think there's a lot to be said for that. I know that a lot of times you look at a guy that might have played at Brigham Young and say, hey, he was pretty good at Brigham Young, and we know that he'll be successful. And I think Peely would have been had he not been injured. But I do like the idea. There's a running back at South Carolina that's doing really well. His name is Mario Anderson. He came from Newberry. In the first game or two, he did nothing. And then they started giving him the ball 20 times a game. And then since then, he's averaging like over 100 yards from the line of scrimmage. He's a pretty good football player. I think it makes sense to do what you're suggesting, and that's to take somebody who's been really good at a smaller school and is still real hungry, and you take him and bring him up to a higher level. He performs well, and that increases his value for the NFL.
I remember Jacob Warren telling me that McAllen Castles was stunned that they had an open eating area and that they didn't have to cook their own food every night. And he was so excited that he was just like, this is amazing. And he immediately put on like 10, 15 pounds just in the spring. So yeah, I mean, you get there and you're appreciative. I don't know that Dante Thornton is appreciative. And I know that he really shopped himself in terms of getting the best deal he possibly could. And I think he probably feels like he got the money that he needs to live for quite some time. And he's going to find out when he's in his 30s that, you know, $100,000 or whatever the number isn't going to get you through the rest of your life.
Well, on an overall view, if you think making NIL money is better than NFL money, you're not very smart. If you had come to a program and then you produced and got drafted and played in the NFL for 5 years, that's a whole lot more money than you're going to make on an NIL deal in college. So if that was his thinking, that wasn't very smart.
No, and John Calipari has a great line. He said, you're tripping over nickels instead of making millions. When he's
I thought you were tripping over thoroughbreds.
Tripping over thoroughbreds. Yeah, that's right.
You know what they get in Kentucky?
Yeah, or hair gel. Jim, I wonder with, pardon me, the personnel thing, is Josh Heupel too stubborn? Because you've mentioned the D. Williams thing and the Dante Thornton thing, and I feel like that Joe Milton's being shoved down our throats just a little bit, and I just feel like he doesn't want to be wrong publicly at times with some of his personnel moves. Am I crazy to think that?
No, I think he is a little bit stubborn. I think a lot of good coaches are a little bit stubborn. There's one that coaches the Patriots right now that's pretty stubborn too, isn't he?
Yeah.
So, yeah, probably a little bit. The thing that you have to do, though, is that not every suggestion that comes from fans of the media is stupid, okay? So I think sometimes you have to sit back and say, you know, that's a pretty good point. I'm not going to not play this guy just because people in the media or fans think I should. So I think that sometimes coaches do get a little bit stubborn. And this gets back to where this guy told me, and I don't know if it's right or not, but he said Heupel went for that fourth down after the Joe Milton thing because he was mad at the officials with making a bad spot. That's not a reason to go for fourth down. So, and Yeah, I think a little bit, but I don't think that's unlike a lot of coaches in the game today.
Yeah,
And GM, since you brought up Bill Belichick, because I think of Dave's favorite team, the Cowboys. Tex Schramm, I think, was the best GM in football for 20 years and was so arrogant in the 80s that he basically did himself in because he thought he could find anybody out of high school at that point. I read a story about Tex Schramm, so I know that as a student of history.
Well, and they got, I mean, they'd go get a basketball player. Was it Mel Renfro? And becomes a really good NFL player. They would go out and get, they signed several people that were not really good college players and ended up being pretty good players in the NFL. But you don't want to bet your house on that, right?
No, Bill Bates would be a great example as well from Farragut. It's interesting to me to dig your heels into the sand. I mean, I think everything should be fluid in terms of personnel. And I'm not saying if a guy has a bad game that you bench him, but Jimmy, if in the offseason Nico looked as good or better than Joe Milton, then I don't see any reason why he shouldn't start the season. And for people that say he's too thin, hey, you and I both stood next to Casey Clausen when he started his first game against Alabama. I could have bench pressed that guy.
Peyton Manning was pretty thin too his freshman year. So and I don't know. You may have better insight into that, Dave, than I do in talking to some players, but I don't. The ones that I have talked, the people I have talked to, say that Nico is not quite ready. Okay, now what does that mean? Part of it is you have to. This offense requires an awful lot of reading by the quarterback. He's got to read the defense and be on the same page as the receivers reading the defense as well. He's got to be able to read on the zone read, which I still think is a predetermined call most of the time for Tennessee. So there's a lot of reading involved with what he's doing, and there's making sure you got the pass protections as well. And is he accurate? From what I've heard, he's a pretty accurate passer. He's a better runner, I think, a more natural runner than Joe Milton. I think he's going to be a star. So the aversion to playing him right now, maybe because he's, quote, not ready, whatever that means. But I've heard that from several people. But my goodness, if you lose to Kentucky, I'm not sure I'd want to make his first start against Georgia.
No.
But I would certainly look at maybe a Connecticut if I know that my season is headed in a downward spiral. The other thing you have to evaluate a little bit is that this is Joe Milton's team. Or the players going to revolt? I don't know. If Nico comes in and plays well, nobody revolts, right? Or they shouldn't.
No.
I think that's a tough call for a coach to make. Going back to the Peyton Manning thing, that wasn't a tough call at all. He had injuries. He had injuries to Jerry Colquitt. He had injury to Todd Helton. Helton didn't really want to be the starter anymore. And so Manning gets elevated and has a battle with Brandon Stewart. So that wasn't a decision, we're going to bench this guy for this guy. No. It's more similar, and we've talked about this, to Kelly Bryant at Clemson getting benched for Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I would definitely defer. I'm glad you brought that up about the Nico thing. I would definitely defer to you on that and what you've heard, because what I've been told is that he's ready to go if he had to, but that, and this isn't coming from players, he's ready to go if he has to. However, they love Joe Milton and they're not going to make a change, even if it were close. That's what I was told. So I would defer to you if you've been told he's not ready.
I think there's a lot of truth to the second thing you said about Milton. I really do. But again, if you're starting to head toward a 7-5, why not give him some snaps? Here's the other thing too. So I know Caleb thinks punting's overrated. I wonder if giving him a few snaps late in the season's overrated, because I heard a lot when Manning was a quarterback. Man, they got to get T. Martin ready. And T. Martin didn't hardly play at all because they were trying to build up Manning for the stats, for the Heisman Trophy. And then T. Martin comes in with much a lack of experience and wins a national championship. Now, to me, the difference in that was, look at the team that T. Martin was surrounded by.
Yeah.
He didn't have to carry the load like Hendon Hooker or Milton or Nico will have to in this offense. So I see that as a difference. But I've heard the argument about, T. Martin didn't get any experience. He won a national championship.
But we'll also have to say, too, T. Martin was also, yes, he had a loaded team, but that was a rough situation. Not only did he have to take over, but that was probably the most brutal start to a schedule Tennessee's ever had in 98 because they had to play Syracuse, Florida, and Georgia, like two top 10 teams, and then the Big East champion and the Big East champion on the road. I mean, like, and Martin didn't play well until about the second half of the Georgia game that year.
Yeah, and what he would do, he would make a big play, like against Syracuse. He took off and ran for 64 yards, but he didn't. When you evaluated the game, he did not have a very good game. That's true. So yeah, it took him a while to really hit his stride as a Tennessee quarterback and become consistently good. Even though he would make a big play or a key play here or there. I mean, the Florida game, I forgot his stats, but his numbers. I think I'm right about this. I think he threw for like 65 yards in that Florida game. But he threw that touchdown pass to Peerless Price where he lobbed it up in the end zone. So, yeah, I agree with that point about Martin. It did take him a while before you hit his groove as a quarterback.
Jimmy, great stuff as always. You can check out his column on offthehooksports.com. I'll have a prediction column as well. And we appreciate you. And no punning allowed.
No, well, now I'm going to go do a history on Harvard football. I'm going to go study how that Harvard, what are they, the red, the crimson? Well, the crimson, there you go.
You still have to have the talent. I'm just saying that look, I'm just going to say it. I think there is a market in football, and there's about to be a Moneyball era for coaches, Jimmy, because with NIL, you can't just have the dump truck of cash like Jimbo Fisher anymore. You just can't do that. And what people are going to realize, and I think Nebraska did this with Matt Rule, by the way, they're playing analytics. Has anybody noticed Nebraska's on a 4-game winning streak right now? And they're going to make their first bowl.
Not.
Yeah, no.
Who they beat? Oh, they beat
nobody worth. But who did? Wait, they're
Harvard. Did they beat Harvard?
They would have lost to Harvard with Scott Frost, though. So, I mean, I'm just saying there's going to be a market for the Mike Elkos of the world that are Ivy League play probabilities, but also understand football, and you'll be able to get them at a Moneyball price. Because I think, by and large, coaches make basic mistakes because they're usually former players who don't understand probabilities and math. And the Falcons Super Bowl is all I got to say for that. Dan Campbell and the Super Bowl against the Patriots is the most obvious case of that. Any one of us could have won that game and would not have blown a 28-3 lead.
It's a lot.
All right. Well, hey, look, I've been trying to get to my Harvard analytics, so leave me. I got to go. Okay.
Jimmy, great stuff. Congratulations. By the way, you had a wedding over the weekend. Your daughter got married. So congratulations to you and your family.
Well, I appreciate that. It was a phenomenal wedding. Great scene, great weather. Everything went off splendidly. I was very thrilled with that. One of the greatest days of my life. I appreciate that day, but it was a really special day for my daughter to get married.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
You guys take care.
Take care. It's Jimmy Hyams. We certainly appreciate his contribution. Coming up on the program, Tennessee's run off some quarterbacks. Would the Vols have been better off with 4 quarterbacks that they essentially pushed out the door as compared to Joe Milton? Portions of the program brought to you by Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. All I ask is that you follow them on Facebook and see what they're sharing each and every day when it comes to sports memorabilia, especially about the Vols. Daily updates. Just go to Facebook and follow them at sportstreasures.com. Would the Vols have been better off with the quarterbacks that we're going to discuss that have been run off? 2 minutes. Off the Hook Sports.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Hi, I'm Rick Terry, and we at Rick Terry Jewelry Designs pride ourselves in the highest quality craftsmanship from a family-owned business here in Knoxville for over 35 years. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we also take pride in being an affordable option for all your game day accessories, especially those fire opals. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we want to be your jeweler every day and especially on game day. Go Vols!
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
There's your bear.
These mountains hold and defend a spirit far better than moonshine. A drink that holds flavor, that becomes necessity. A hard cider made and relished by folk who are as hearty as they are legend. A refreshment that can only be found in one place. With a taste that makes you say, give me 3 bottles of the good stuff. Tennessee Cider Company, where necessity can be found.
Objective coverage. Hey, that's new.
If we get caught, we're going to jail.
The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of Off the Hook Sports. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app.
I'm going to need to see some identification.
Back to Dave Hooker.
Caleb has an Alabama hangover stat before we get to some quarterbacks that have been run off by the Vols, and would Tennessee be better off with them at quarterback instead of Joe Milton? And we're going to get to Salter, Travis, definitely. I don't have a problem with that, and I think you bring up a good point that I want to get to. All right, so you got an Alabama hangover stat?
I do, and I know what Jimmy's talking about. Tennessee 6-9 after losing to Alabama with Nick Saban. However, including last year when they won, against the spread, Tennessee's actually 10-5-1. So I think a lot of that 6-9, I think a lot of that's more about Tennessee just being a bad team most of those years than playing Alabama.
I do feel, though, that there's an Alabama, in general, not just Tennessee, I do feel like there's an Alabama hangover. I can't statistically prove it, but I think you play that team and they're physical and tough. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I think the point you brought up and the point Jimmy brought up about this year, it being an emotional game, or because Tennessee thought they had a chance to win. Yeah, you have a point with that. But I think it's only a hangover if you put a lot in, if you genuinely go in hoping to win and don't throw it away and chalk it up as a loss like Tennessee did in most of those years. And so,
well, I tell you, Caleb, it's just, for you to put it all on the line, forget the physical part of it, but for you to put it all on the line emotionally, have the lead, and you look like you're going to beat Alabama 2 years in a row, and then for that to get ripped out from under you, not just losing a lead late, that just seems like it's tough. And these guys are pros, and I think Tennessee, well, kind of they're pros. These guys at Tennessee, they have not good leadership, incredible leadership, great leadership. Look at how they bounce back from heartbreaking losses. But even for this team, it seems like it would be tough to get up for that Monday practice. I'm not talking about the game on Saturday. I'm talking about what's already happened. To have your best practice on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that to me seems like it would be difficult the way they lost. I don't have a stat to prove it. It just seems difficult.
No, I agree. I'm trying to bring up, I agree with you about this year, but I don't think it has applied to Tennessee over the last 15 years because I think that has more to do with Tennessee. I don't think Tennessee was emotionally invested in most of those games with Alabama. I mean, I don't think Tennessee fans were. I think there was one year people were rooting for Alabama to cover the spread because they wanted Butch Jones fired so badly. And it was like a 42-point spread and they still covered. But I think it was, but you are right because I remember, I mean, you covered some Tennessee teams that had hangovers after that Florida loss and they struggled the next week because they just couldn't mentally get into the game after putting everything into Florida and then losing and then knowing your season might be over.
No, here we go. It is time for 4 downs. Cooper Mays will lead us into it. We're going to talk some quarterbacks. Cooper, what should people do, though, right now?
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
Yes, please hit like and subscribe. We greatly appreciate that. Big group on board today. So thank you so much. It is time for 4 downs, and it is right now, I think, if I can find the right button, which I think I can. Do you have faith in me, Caleb?
I got faith in you.
Let's do it.
4 downs. 4 questions. 4 answers. The Dave Hooker Show.
4
downs. A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
And it's brought to you by Tennessee Cider Company, tncidercompany.com. Use the promo code HAT. Get free swag with any cider that you can get delivered most anywhere in the United States of America. Can we go ahead and agree that, because I'm not going to include this in 4 downs, but can we go ahead and agree that Tennessee would be better off with Michael Penix Jr., who's a Heisman Trophy candidate, than Joe Milton right now, who Tennessee did run off with Jeremy Pruitt's staff, essentially pulled his scholarship. Can we agree with that one?
Yes, we can absolutely agree with that one. And as a matter of fact, Tennessee had Adrian Martinez committed that year too, who ended up going to Nebraska. I was higher on Adrian Martinez at the time. I did not see Penix doing what he did.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move to some other quarterbacks that Tennessee could have had. And I'll ask you, Caleb, if the Vols would have been better off. And you can give us a little background about why they didn't become Vols. Again, hit that like and subscribe button. Greatly appreciate it. What down, Coop?
Coop here. First down.
All right, first down. It is Caden Salter. Now, he is not a Vol because publicly he had 2 marijuana charges. And I will agree with Travis that you have to be more particular with the leadership on your team at quarterback. So while that might have not gotten a defensive tackle kicked off the team, quarterback, I understand that. But aside from that, would Tennessee have been better off with Caden Salter, who is where, Caleb?
He is at Liberty now.
Okay. Would Tennessee have been better off with Caden Salter than Joe Milton? Yay or nay?
Yes. Yes, Caden Salter's a better quarterback.
Ouch. I didn't think you'd go that direction. Okay.
No, that's an easy one for me.
Okay. I will agree. All right, here we go.
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
Brian Moore, who Tennessee
Mauer.
ran off, and I'm not going to get into particulars how I know, but I know. So they definitely ran him off. Would they have been better off with Brian Moore?
That's actually a tough one. I'm going to say no because Mauer does not have Milton's mobility, but he is much more accurate than Milton is. The decision-making still was questionable, but that's hard for me to judge because I only saw Mauer play as a true freshman, and you can question anybody's decision-making as a true freshman. Joe Milton's a 6th-year senior, and he's having these issues.
He's like 32 years old. He gets a senior citizen discount.
Exactly. So, yeah. So I'm still going to say Milton slightly because he had a bigger arm in his mobility, but Mauer was much more accurate. And we were talking about this over the phone last night, Dave. I'll take hitting a bare minimum with an arm and pinpoint accuracy over a big arm. And I don't care what system you're playing in.
Yeah. I think there's an arm strength that you have to play at certain levels. And aside from that, I think it's gravy. I really do. What down, Coop?
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
Harrison Bailey. Better off than with Joe Milton?
No. And Harrison Bailey was a 5-star recruit. Actually came from that. He and Ramel Keaton were teammates in high school. That was a duo in high school, and Jeremy Pruitt got both of them. But Harrison Bailey shouldn't have been a 5-star. His pocket presence is terrible. If we remember, he went to UNLV after Tennessee and couldn't start at UNLV. Now he's transferred to Louisville, and he's 3rd on the depth chart at Louisville. Harrison Bailey has a big arm, and actually he does have accuracy, but his pocket presence is so bad. And it's so bad, Dave, I don't think you could fix it in a college career.
Yeah, I talk about accuracy being innate. Pocket presence to some extent is innate too, just having that feel. I don't think anybody taught Patrick Mahomes to do some of the things that he does moving around. So I'm going to surprise you with this one and go a little bit off script. What down, Coop?
All SEC center Cooper Mays here. 4th down.
Gaston Moore. Youch.
No, they're not going to be better with Gaston Moore in there.
Really?
I don't think so. I feel like
you
they'd
don't
be better
think
off with,
so?
I feel like Navy Schuler would have a better argument because Navy Schuler at least has mobility.
Okay, well, this argument was presented to me, which spring practice is spring practice, guys. Okay, so we saw which running back I've even
Cam
forgotten.
Selton.
Yeah, he lit it up. And there was a Michael Brewster and there was a Kirsten Biggers, if anybody remembers those names, that lit it up in spring practice. Why? It's because they didn't want to get the good running backs hurt. But Gaston Moore looked good in spring practice, looked good in the spring game. You couldn't even see that being a possibility if they came out and said, man, Joe's just struggling with the offense, Gaston Moore time. More.
That would have
Give
been
me
like
more.
Dave, when you cover the 2005 saga with Rick Clausen and Eric Ainge, notice they never turned to Jim Bob Cooter.
Ooh, okay. I'm just going to give you that. You win. Because they didn't.
They never even gave him a look.
Okay, but I would argue that Rick Clausen and Gaston Moore are somewhat analogous, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but look, you guys have covered, and I've gotten the full story from covering you guys now, which is that Rick Clausen outperformed Ainge in all of fall camp and in the summer workouts, and Fulmer went with Ainge, and he should have gone with Clausen. Well, I understand why he went with Ainge, because I saw Clausen play the season. After Fulmer fully went with Rick Clausen, Rick Clausen was bad. He just couldn't do things, okay? Let's not forget that Tennessee lost a game to Alabama 6-3.
Yeah. Well, and remember this too. I talk about bare minimum arm strength. I'm not sure Rick Clausen had it. To play in college football, I'm not sure he had the bare minimum arm strength. And I think you could probably, ask that about Gaston Moore as well. Now, Travis, who is a monstrous Joe Milton guy and has accused me of being too hard on Joe Milton, says I do like Gaston Moore. And then we've got Roto22 said, could Gaston play the way Joe did against Alabama? Well, he's not going to run for any yards. Can't we agree on that, Caleb? I mean, he's not going to run like Joe Milton did.
No, the quarterback play was not the reason Tennessee lost that game.
I agree.
I don't think they win that game with Hendon Hooker. Now, Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt, maybe. But I don't think they win that game if you just replace Milton with Hooker on Saturday. They beat Florida. They're not beating Alabama.
Man, I don't know about that. I think they convert. I think with Hooker they do win, actually, because they convert on a couple of those red zone opportunities where they had to kick field goals. They're leading by a little bit more. I think he makes a couple more plays. So Alabama makes their surge in the third quarter, but Tennessee's able to hold on because they have a bigger lead from the first half. I think with Hooker they win that Alabama game.
I don't mean you're going to have to disagree on this. I think Alabama, if they wanted to, let's go. If Alabama wanted to, by the way, they could have scored probably another touchdown in that game at the end. So we're talking, it was 34-20, could have been 41-20. And so I
don't want to fight anytime soon. I'll go ahead and tell you, I'm a one-punch wonder. After that, I'm gonna get really, really tired.
So you'll do the Jeremy Banks you'll do Jeremy Banks move, then. One punch and then peace.
Yeah, and then but Banks did. I don't know why Banks just threw one punch, but I would just be fatigued. I mean, when's the last time you've been in a fight? 30 seconds in a fight is a long time.
It is. Trust me. When I used to take my dog to a dog park, and when a fight broke out, if you didn't have that thing done in 10 seconds, there could be some serious damage. And
Green Wave agrees with me, and I love his car emoji. I look at
guys,
that every time.
they don't win with Hendon.
Yeah, they
Hooker.
win with Hooker. They win, and he means me, not Hendon, right?
Yeah. Obviously, with Dave, they win.
Yeah.
By the way, just totally random since we brought up Banks. Do you think half the reason Joe Milton has such a respect for the team was because of how he got involved with the Banks and Hooker fight last year?
Absolutely. Yes. No question about it. That's a big factor. And he was willing to wait his time. And yes, those two factors are 1A and 1B. No question about it. College football viewership way up. I said this yesterday, and I believe it, that college football, especially with the 12-team playoff, will rival the NFL. So I'm curious, since we have a lot of people on board today, are you NFL fans, yay or nay? And could you see college football being as big as the NFL? Because the NFL is the monster. I can tell you from working from ESPN, you wanted to get your Saturday stories in as quick as possible because they were going to be pushed off of the front page of ESPN.com by about 9 a.m. Sunday morning, if not earlier. It was going to be all NFL. And if you want to check out ESPN.com this weekend, you'll see the same thing. The college football coverage is going to be pushed off. Of course, all they run is AP stories now, but that's a whole different story. Caleb, talk about some tweets that we put out there. And if you want to put them up on the screen, we can. But do you think that college football can be as big as the NFL? Because there's some recent tweets in terms of ratings that believe that very well could be the case. Why, Caleb?
Yeah, so this comes from Michael Mulvihill, who is the insights and analytics guy for Fox Sports. So he brought up that Big Noon Saturday, which the Big Ten has, and this is something that's common. One of the longstanding traditions of college football, Dave, and you know this, dating back to since cable TV became a thing, there was this belief that people like night games and not noon games. Not true. People love noon football. They do. And the Big Ten made that bet, and it's paying off. Their Big Noon Saturday average is up 9% from last year, 25% from 2021.
Wow.
And yeah, and it's up 14% at 11 a.m., the kickoff show for Big Noon, most growth of any pregame show. Now, another point brought up from Mulvihill is that through week 8, the year-over-year trend for all college football is now 14% above last year. And the 5-year trend, 29% growth over 5 years.
Okay, let me ask you why. Why is that the case? Is it the NFL has done something that has led people in their weekends to spend more time with college football, or is it college football has done something? Because that's my question.
I think it's pretty simple. I think college football was in a very dark period in the 2010s, largely because Alabama and Clemson were so head and shoulders above the rest of the country in college football during that time. And I think finally you're seeing more parity brought to it. And so you see, I think the reason it's so up this year is, I'm just going to be honest, this is the most wide open year since 2007. We are almost at the end of October, Dave, and there are probably 20 teams that still could make the college football playoff right now. You're usually to about 8 or 9 at this time of year in a regular year for the college football playoff. You're at 20 right now. And I think it might be more than that. And so these regular season games carry huge magnitude. The Penn State-Ohio State game last week was gigantic in that regard. Penn State is still in the hunt, but they now have to play catch up and hope they get a little help along the way. And
Check out this number. Despite its continued ratings dominance, and they are still dominating the NFL, viewership declined for the 2022 regular season. Okay. Across all viewing sources, the average audience was 16.7 million compared to 17.1 million. So it is declining for whatever reason. And I think part of it is that it's so expensive to go to a game. You don't have that connection with the team so that you watch them on TV when you can't go to the games or it's an away game. It's so incredibly expensive to go to games. Now, college football may soon get in that realm too, and may be really close to it. I also wonder too, I know this has been a long time, and I don't want to turn this into a political conversation, but the Colin Kaepernick thing, I think, did turn a lot of people off, and the kneeling thing. And there are a lot of people I know that were huge NFL fans, would dress up head to toe and support their NFL team. And when the kneeling thing happened, they wrote it off forever. Do you think that still has an effect, or is that a reach? Because that's now been 8 years?
I think that had an effect in 2017. I don't think it has an effect anymore. And I think the reason it doesn't have an effect anymore is, the data came out and then the NFL just exploded in ratings in 2018 and 2019. Here's what happened with the Colin Kaepernick thing. The kneel down thing happened in 2016. ESPN and networks realized it was ratings gold for them on the talk shows to talk about the kneeling. So they showed all the players kneeling in 2017, and then of course, as we know, whatever you think about it, Donald Trump saw this kind of as a political opportunity. So he jumped in on it himself. Right. And so it became a massive division. The NFL, rightly, and I think they did this smartly, got it right. They finally went to the networks and said, hey, you guys want us to carry games on your network in the future? You better stop showing this stuff. You better stop even promoting it. Don't talk about it. And I think that was a big deal because, let's be honest, yes, it's good for the ESPN talk shows, but it's not good for the Sunday night football or the Monday night football game on ESPN with the ratings. And I think they finally realized they stopped talking about it, and it helped the ratings after that.
I'll give you two reasons. Nobody watches a sporting event when the stands are empty. Okay, that's proven. And it's not just the fact that there's lack of interest in person and on television. It's that you see empty stands and it's a bad visual. You can always tell when that's the case because the crowd won't pan up to the fans. Okay, so that's a proven thing that television executives know. On the flip side, when you see Neyland Stadium going bat stuff crazy, don't you get a little bit excited? Don't you think that, hey, this is fun to watch? Or you see some other program, or you see Texas going crazy to play Alabama or that sort of thing? I think you do. And the other thing is Gary Danielson said, he told us that the college game is bastardized, is the word he used, by the fact that offensive linemen are allowed to release on passing plays and essentially block downfield. Maybe it is. Maybe that's not pure football. But let me tell you something. It's more fun to watch.
It is. I mean, look at it? And it is. It absolutely is. And look at NFL like betting lines, for instance. Over-under in NFL games are in the 30s and the 40s. If like the Iowa-Minnesota under last week, the Iowa scores are commonplace in the NFL. You know what I mean? When we make fun of Iowa. And that's a problem. The other issue, I think one of the things that is hurting the NFL this year, if it's down this year, and guys, everything's relative. NFL's still king. Like, it's still the king of kings. It's one thing that helps the NFL, but Dave, I think it's hurting it right now, which is this. The NFL has always been helped by the fact that every team, no matter who you root for, with one good offseason can become a Super Bowl contender. I mean, there's so much parity. But I think there's so much parity now. I think it's gotten to a point where it's hard to create narratives because every team is almost on an exact even playing field.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there's no story as good as the Patriots were, whether you liked them or hated them now.
You need a villain.
Great point. And I think you're going to see more parity in college football because of the transfer portal, because of the NIL money. I don't think you're ever going to see a program anywhere close to as dominant as Alabama has been. And I'm including Georgia in that, who I believe is at the top right now. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. We greatly appreciate you. Weekdays at 10 a.m. Join us live. He is Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports. Have a great morning, day, afternoon, whatever the case may be when you're watching. We'll talk to you each weekday at 10 a.m.